Our last presentation, a discussion of how chant applies to St. Rose today and the extent to which we use it. So now the big question, to what extent should we use chant today at St. Rose? There are multiple answers to this huge question, just like there are multiple definitions of Gregorian chant, so I'll try to break it down. First, during the pandemic, as long as we have restrictions on congregational singing, we have an opportunity to recover an old act of Catholic lay participation which has largely fallen away. That is, active listening. During the liturgical movement, popes and writers wrote extensively how being attentive to the liturgy with our ears and hearts was just as actively participating as singing along. The liturgical movement I mentioned in the last presentation occurred in the early 20th century. But it is an act of meditation. Lots of people are uncomfortable with this now, as they assume that participation means one needs to know all the words and gestures and follow along out loud. That's good, but it's not the only way. Right now, we are more or less forced into a more meditative understanding of participation. Again, active listening. And while we are actively listening, we can do two things. One, we can become accustomed to the rhythm and the sound of the propers, even if we aren't doing the official Gregorian ones in Latin right now. And two, we can listen to the melodies of the ordinary week after week after week and internalize them. Second, we need to recognize whose jobs are whose. The propers of the Mass historically have been seen as the job of the choir and or cantor, not of the congregation. As we mentioned, the original Gregorian melodies are incredibly complicated, thus they should be sung by a trained expert. Even if we aren't singing these Gregorian melodies, since the texts and melodies change each week, it's too much to ask a group of people who haven't rehearsed to sing them on the fly. However, it is the congregation's job to sing the ordinary of the Mass, the Kyrie, Gloria, etc. We've always done this in English. We can do it in Latin. The only Mass right now where we have the Mass ordinary in Latin is the 5 p.m. on Sundays. That's the only one where that's going to be the case for the foreseeable future. We've been singing the same settings of the Mass, at that Mass, the Missa de Angelis, for a few weeks now. Right now, our goal is for people to listen to these melodies week after week and internalize them, store them away. In a little while, we will switch to a different setting at that Mass of the ordinary in Latin, and they will do the same thing. Again, since we aren't supposed to have congregational singing, at least not singing without masks, it's a good time to have congregational active listening and learning, so that when we are allowed to sing fully and robustly again, the congregation can sing music it never thought it could sing. One quick note on a couple of unique parts of the liturgy in the modern Mass, the responsorial psalm and the communion. Yes, these do change every single week, and so they belong to the propers. However, unlike the introit and the offertory, there's been a huge push to create settings of these which can be instantly singable by the congregation, even without rehearsal. The whole genre of the responsorial psalm, which was pretty much invented after Vatican II, replacing the gradual, is to have a very short snippet of scripture that can be set to simple music so that the congregation can sing it right away. The cantor or choir sings the verses, as is their job, just as it is their job to sing the introit and offertory. But the congregation should be able to pick up on the response right away. The same goes for the communion. Now, one can choose a setting of the communion that is chanty, based on the Gregorian melody, belonging to the cantor or choir alone. However, unlike the introit and offertory, there are many, many settings of the communions by composers which are intended to be sung in the exact same manner as the responsorial psalm. A response, which the congregation sings, and verses, which the cantor or choir sings. The response is the communion itself, while the verses are added from a psalm in order to fill time. This is what we do at St. Rose at the English Masses. It functions the same way as the responsorial psalm. The congregation is intended to sing along to the response, and that is what we want here. As far as singing the divine office, this is a complicated question to answer. It can be sung by a congregation in alternation, as we mentioned in that presentation. One side of the room sings a phrase, the other side responds. This requires learning psalm tones, which I've been singing as the settings of the responsorial psalms at Mass. Learning how to follow the formulas can be challenging. It just takes time. As for the responsories and the other more complex aspects of the office, so much has changed that I'm not sure how many of these old medieval responsories are still prescribed to be used. Nonetheless, the first baby step in the office is simply to be able to sing those psalm tones. We're hoping to put together a sung office during Advent, which the congregation can participate in. So, to summarize the answer to this question, to what extent should we use chant today at St. Rose? I have several answers. One, right now we are using a lot of chant and music based on chant, more so than ever before, as congregational singing is discouraged. It is an opportunity to be immersed in a more traditional and different musical world. Two, when singing the introit and offertory, we do not expect the congregation to join in. That is not their job. Right now we expect them to actively listen. Right now we are singing those only in English and Spanish, but we could try using the actual Gregorian settings at some point. I imagine probably at the 5 o'clock. Number 3, the congregation should be able to learn and sing, if not right away, chant settings of the Mass Ordinary. At all English and Spanish Masses, we are using a vernacular setting based on a very simple Gregorian setting, except the 5 p.m. on Sundays, where we use a Latin chant setting, an actual Gregorian chant setting. Right now, the congregation should listen and learn through repetition. When we are allowed to again, we should sing along. And number 4, we do not use chant settings of the responsorial psalm or the communion, at least not at the English Masses. We try to keep them simple so the congregation can listen and respond right away. However, I try to find settings that have a chant-like feel to them and have verses which use the authentic chant psalm tones. Hopefully, people internalize these tones so they can sing at communal office. And one final note. What about hymns? As I indicated, hymns belong in the office and propers at Mass. However, there will come a time when congregational and choral singing are allowed in full again. When that happens, we will use hymns again to varying degrees at different Masses. But it's important to note that hymns should not replace the propers. I believe that it is possible to sing both a hymn and a proper, although there could be a challenge in timing it right. But the proper takes liturgical precedence. This has been my musical video series. Thanks for tuning in.